The right thing may be the right thing, but the right thing may not be at the right time. We are Saints in the South, your source for gospel growth and good times. All right, welcome everyone. Episode 125. We are Saints in the South. Marcus and myself holding down the fort.
That's right.
While Kenny is out cruising away.
He's on a cruise. I mean,
he's on a cruise somewhere. He's living the big life, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, his benefits package must have been a little better than ours.
That's right.
Deal. I don't know what's going on. So
that's right. Well, hey, man, we are finally at the week that I've been waiting for 2.5 years.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
David and Goliath is my favorite Bible story of all time.
This is the big one, man.
This is the big one. I've used this story a few times in talks and stuff over the years.
That's right.
But
and I'm gonna let you have all of David and Goliath.
Okay.
I'll just give a little foreground on the on Saul and
Saul leading up to it. Yeah.
That, and I'll let you take the center stage on the
David
and Goliath.
That sounds good. Well, so just to mention the title. Well, so we're in 1 Samuel.
Right.
And we'll cover a few chapters, 8 through 10, 13, and then 15 through 18.
Right.
But the I love the title, and it's "The Battle is the Lord's."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where we'll start. And Marcus, you can take it from here. And
all right. Well, I mean, just starting out in chapter 8, Samuel 8. This is just to give a little background of Samuel. So if you look at, and we mentioned this sort of last week, if you look at the title of the book of Samuel, it's actually called it says also known. Let's see how it says it here. Otherwise called the first book of the Kings. And that's because Samuel is the first prophet in a long time. And all of a sudden the people want a king to lead them for whatever reason. And it's interesting. They say in verse 7 in chapter 8, it says, "And the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people and all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them." So here's these people, they're wanting a king, and as we read down, this sounds very interesting. It says in verse 18, it says, "And ye shall cry out in the day." I'm sorry, I shouldn't say 18, 20 is what I meant to say. It says in chapter 8, verse 20, right? It says that we also may be like all the nations. This is what the people's telling Samuel why they want a king. This is their reason why they want a king. Before this, Samuel's telling them everything the Lord told him of why it's not good to have a king. And it's a lot of the same things that we hear in the Book of Mormon of why it's not good to have kings. They can be corrupt. They can, and two, Samuel's really telling them like, hey, this king's going to take your sons and your daughters and make him his servants, and you're going to have to pay a tax. You're going to have to, basically be subject to this king. And this is what
it real quick. It's a lot easier to become corrupt because there's nobody else to hold you accountable. Exactly.
Exactly. You're really putting you're putting yourself in the hands of one person in a way, and it can be dangerous. It also can be a great thing when you got like Benjamin of the Book of Mormon. He was a wonderful king. He was wonderful, That's right. But when they're not, and we know about those. And so in verse 20, they say this is their reasoning after he explains all this to them, and tells them that the Lord is really not for this. This isn't really what you need. This is what they say. They say that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. That's why they want a king, because everybody else has got one.
Right.
Everybody else has got one. We're not cool. We want to be cool like everybody else. And the first thing that came to my mind is comparison is the thief of joy. They want to compare themselves. And I think we see that today. I mean, I think it's everywhere, especially with social media.
That's right,
man. You can see everything with social media. And who posts their worst? I want to be that first guy that just posts everything bad about my life on social media.
Yeah. I've actually thought about doing that before. Yeah. Right? They just like only post bad, have a page for just bad stuff.
Yeah, real life.
The real life.
I think
that would take off. I think that site would take off for sure.
I think so. I mean, at least it would be like a feel good site for people. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Right.
oh, okay,
Exactly.
he's struggling. But in reality, we're all struggling. And yet everything we post on social media is our highlights.
The
That's our
highlights.
highlights, you know, and that's
And that's one of Satan's tools that he
absolutely
uses for sure.
absolutely. So that's why they want a king. They want a king because everybody else has got a king, and they want to be cool and have a cool king that'll lead them into their battles. When in reality, they already had the King of Kings, Jehovah, you know, Jesus Christ, that was leading them and trying his best with Samson and with Gideon and with all these others that were in. They were defeating and doing all these miracles, and it's amazing to me. The children of Israel really amaze me as we go here. But we're those people.
Right. That's right. Well, so we gave him some slack in the early stages, right? Nat,
right.
listen, they've been around long enough now and seen enough. Listen, they should be straightening up by now for sure.
I mean, seriously, I mean, it's like, what is going on, guys? But
yeah.
So anyway, so they want a king. We move into chapter 9, Saul, you know, without giving a whole ton of background on how they chose Saul. Saul was there was a man named Benjamin, and it says in verse 1 there, a man named Benjamin whose son was Kish, the son of, and we need Kenny here to pronounce all these names. Anyway, the son of the son of the son of, and he had a son whose name was Saul, and he was a choice young man and a goodly. It says, and a goodly. I'm hoping I'm a goodly one day. And there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he, for his shoulders and upward. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. In other words, this was just a really good guy. You know, and you know, basically Samuel has heard of him and has seen him and has basically scoped him out. That's, you know, he's looking for a king, you know, with the Lord's help.
So another kind of a little insight, something that will come into play significantly in just a little bit with David. But those last few words where he said that he was higher than everybody else from the shoulders up.
Right.
So he was a big dude. He was large.
Yeah.
He was large in stature.
Right.
There's another verse in here as well where it points out him being taller than everybody else. So he really fit the mold of what you would want a king to be and to look like. You know, large in stature, strong. You know, someone to lead. You know, another Samson type or a Gideon, like you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's you know, he's a guy that looks like a king, I guess. I don't know what that makes sense, but he's the leader guy.
Well, you know that like, so even today, you know, when you see, you know, tall men, kind of large in stature, you know, there's almost an immediate respect just off their pure size. Right. And, you know, so if you go up, if you're looking at someone that's, you know, 5'5" or 5'6", a man versus someone that's 6'4", 6'5",
Napoleon.
That's right. The tendency is to naturally fear and respect the larger man immediately, rather than the smaller man. So
absolutely. You know, just jumping ahead here, let's go to chapter 13 about Saul. Basically, so Saul was actually a great man. He actually was actually able to do some wonderful things and became a great leader, very Gideon like, you know, really great, doing a good job. Everything's great. And I guess basically, just to sum up kind of what happened to him in a nutshell, so that we can get to the David part, Saul basically started becoming a little bit self-centered and getting some of that Samson you know, vibe, or a little bit of that Samson syndrome, I guess you can call it, where he starts thinking he's the man, you know, it's not the Lord anymore, kind of, and I kind of want to get centered a little bit. He weren't quite as bad as Samson. It does feel like Saul was, the way that it feels as I read it, feels like he was genuine in what he was trying to do. He really did, I believe, love the Lord. He did get a little sidetracked though.
That's right.
And so that's why I love these characters, man. And I say characters, these are real people. I love these people and their stories, because it's us, you know, it's us. It's we have faults, we have shortcomings. But anyway, in 13, the thing that happened was basically Saul is out there and he's ready to fight the Philistines. And but his men were afraid. They're afraid to fight the Philistines. Everybody was. Everyone was afraid, and his army was afraid. And so he knew that he could get Samuel. Samuel was going to come as the prophet, and basically their chaplain, the team chaplain, was coming in,
Right.
and was going to give them prayer and burnt offerings and things like that to make sure the Lord is with them. And basically they were afraid, and as a matter of fact, a lot of his army started to leave. They were like, we're gone, we're seeing you, because Samuel's not getting there yet. He's taking a little bit of time. 7 days, I think, is what he said.
Yeah, he's lagging behind for whatever reason. He's late.
Yeah, he's a little late. And so, they're there and they're waiting. And so all of a sudden Saul says, you know what? I'm going to offer the burnt offering. I'm going to take I'm going to take Samuel's role, and I'm going to do the burnt offering. Well, this was kind of like, as if the way that I make it where we can understand, it's and for the members of our church and members of all Christian churches, it's basically like if the preacher or the bishop, the pastor, I guess you could say, of the congregation is just late, and but he's coming. He's told you, I'll be there in a minute, just sing a hymn, I'll be there. But yet you just stand up and say, you know what, I'm just going to take over today, and I'll just be the bishop today or the pastor today, and I'll do the sermon today.
That's right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, as you've done it, and all of a sudden he shows up or whatever, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? Everybody's kind of leaving, going to the house, and he's like, what's going on here? He's like, what have you done? And it's kind of that, in a way. I mean, it's just to put it in my terms where I can understand things, but so that's what he did. In verse 9, it says, and Saul said, bring hither a burnt offering to me and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. Verse 10, and it came to pass that as soon as he had made an offering, as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him that he might salute him. So to me, it sounds like it was within just a few minutes.
Right. Yeah.
That he made the decision, I'm going to do the burnt offering. All of a sudden, here comes Samuel. And it's like, oh, okay. I mean, just a few more minutes, man. You were so close. Patience is a virtue. You just need a little more patience. But he goes out to greet Saul, and he goes out to greet Samuel, and gives him a good salute. Hello, how you doing? And everything's great. And Samuel said, what hast thou done? What hast thou done? And Saul said, because I saw the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together, et cetera, et cetera. So he starts putting blame everywhere but him. He's like, my army was scared. You were late. Where were you at?
Giving them excuses. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we do, man. We shift the blame.
Yes.
We love to shift blame, and so I guess the question for us, as we put these things to our lives and make them for our day, what do we do during the delays from the Lord? Because the Lord does delay sometimes.
Right.
He wants us to wait.
Right.
And we're sort of in limbo. And what do we do? Do we give up on him? Do we give up on him and say, you know what, I'll just do it myself, Lord? I ain't heard nothing from you. I'm just going to do whatever. I don't care. Or do we trust in him and his timing? Because to trust in the Lord means we trust in his timing. Also, right. We've heard that. We need to remember that it's usually during the delays, though, that we become more polished, right, and we actually grow and become more, but we have to stay focused on the Lord. And so, I look at this, you think, wow, it's not a good thing. Saul really let himself, sort of get overtaken by his power and him being the king, and is like, I can do this, but in reality, that wasn't his role. That wasn't his part, and he just sort of overstepped his bounds, basically.
Right. Yeah. And so a part of me definitely understands where Saul was coming from on this, again, because he sees his army starting to leave and fall apart and everything. And so he, and he's very confident in himself and in his abilities.
Right.
He says, look, I can do this, so, I'm tired of waiting. And if I don't do something, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, so exactly.
He feels like he has to do something.
And that's what I mean. I think Saul he had good intentions, man, as we all do. We all do. But here to end this out with Saul in verse 15 or chapter 15. And Samuel said, hath the Lord as great, and this is verse 22 in chapter 15. And Samuel said, hath the Lord as great delight in hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? He said, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. In other words, he's telling him it's better to obey the Lord and do what's right than it is to just do a right thing, because that right thing may not need to be done right now. You know what I mean? It's, the timing might be off, whatever. So obey and do what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to wait on me. That was being obedient. You knew that was the role. You knew that was the situation. And it's easy to sit here and talk about it as I'm sitting here on a podcast with a microphone. I'm not Saul sitting there with an army that's leaving, and he's got another army
getting ready to
murder everybody. And it's
that's
like, you have to take into context of these things. The best we can do is just try to pull some lessons out of this, and
so here's a quote for you. The right thing may be the right thing, but the right thing may not be at the right time.
Exactly. And so that's what we got to worry about. Are we obedient? Are we obedient? And of course that doesn't mean be obedient when you're told to do the wrong thing. I mean, I'm just saying, when it comes down to it, we need to be obedient, to the Lord and do the things that he would do. It says here, just out of the, I think I got out of the Institute manual. It says Saul's excuse that he had saved the best to sacrifice was simply not acceptable, even if it were true. As Samuel said, to obey is better than sacrifice, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness as an iniquity and idolatry.
Yeah.
The root of Saul's problem is basically his humility. It says he was trusted, and now he trusted in his own wisdom and not to look to God. He started to trust in his own wisdom. It says Saul's repentance was too late and very short-lived. The second violation was essentially the same sin of disobedience he had been guilty of before. It says, had Saul's repentance been deep and sincere, the second incident would have, and that's what we're talking about here, the second incident would have never happened, as the Lord warned in modern times. But unto that soul who sinneth after the Lord has forgiven him shall the former sins return. So he just had this problem with humility. He
definitely had a kind of a roller coaster.
Yeah,
he wanted to do the right thing,
right?
And
he
sometimes
really did.
Yeah,
it's a lot different than some of the, like King Noah of the Book of Mormon, that just went around doing wickedness. He just wanted to be the wicked guy, and evil things. And
that's right.
I feel like Saul, and I don't know Saul, one day hopefully we can meet Saul, but I do feel like he tried to do what's right, but he just, we got to be careful. We got to.
He just fell. He succumbed to the flesh.
He did. He got a little over his head. And what's that quote? I wish I could remember it. Was it Joseph Smith that said that when men get a little power?
So I've got it right here.
Okay,
it's from Doctrine and Covenants, section 121, verse 39. Yeah. We have learned by sad experience that it is the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little authority, as they suppose, they will immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion.
Yeah, and that's kind of where Saul was at this point. So yeah, I mean that's Saul, and of course he loses the kingship. He gets demoted. The Lord actually said that he felt sorry that he had actually called Saul to be a king, because because of Saul's choices, and he wished that he could have done better.
I thought about that for a little bit. Again, the Lord is all knowing, right?
Right.
And then the Lord says that it almost sounds like he made a mistake. Almost the way the scripture reads, and you're like, well, I mean, you knew this was. You knew this was going to happen, ideally, but it all goes back to Saul. Saul has to be given the choice.
Yeah, exactly.
And the opportunity.
Exactly. It's the same as this. When I hear people say stuff like that, and I say things like that, it's like I think about, brother Johnson over here. I'm just using names. He's my ministering companion. He hadn't been to church in 6 years. I know him, he smokes a little or something, and I know he's this and that or whatever. So I'm not even going to call him to ask him to go ministering with me. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do that.
Right.
And you're probably 90% right. He probably don't want to do it, but you got to call him. You got to call him up and say, hey, you're my ministering companion or what. I'm just using, this is just a crazy situation, but you got to give him that opportunity to do that, to do what's right, and let him know, that, hey, I'm here to help you, and this. So the Lord does that. The Lord does that for us. So
right. Yeah. So moving on to David here. So David was the selected one by the Lord to eventually replace Saul. He doesn't
Right.
immediately replace Saul. As a matter of
Right.
fact, David still acts up under the direction of Saul
Yeah.
for some time. But
yeah, I guess Saul still has to sort of teach him what it is to be a king. He
Right.
has been a king for a while. He knows kind of how to go. So
even though Saul ends up trying to kill him a few times,
yeah,
a few
yeah,
times.
it gets a little weird in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So just the gist of the story. I mean, there's a lot of things you go into detail with David and his upbringing. Come from a big family. He was the youngest of his brothers. He ended up being a herdsman or a shepherd, right? He was the one kind of left
Right.
behind, watching over the flock. He was still young, while his brothers were off, going to battle, and so forth. And how he comes across the whole uh, Goliath situation, basically for 40 days, while they're battling. It's something else I didn't really realize, for years, but they're constantly battling, right? And then for 40 days, Goliath would kind of show up at the hilltop and say, look, everybody else can stop fighting if there's one of y'all that want to take on me. And basically the winner takes all is what he was saying.
Right.
And even though, and this is something else that's kind of interesting, even though Saul was kind of large in stature as well, he wasn't as large as Goliath.
Yeah.
And so him, along with all of his other men, were scared to death, and
Right.
they weren't going to take their chances. And this gets back to David is given an assignment by his father to go bring some provisions, to his brothers and so forth. He shows up, and he just so happens to hear Goliath up there saying, basically defiling God, defiling the children of God. And Goliath is saying, look, y'all, you people claim to be the children of God. You people claim to be God's people. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care if God's with you or not. None of y'all can take me.
Right.
And so that upset David.
Right.
It ticked him off. And so he goes to his brothers. He's like, what are y'all doing? Why is no one taking this guy on?
Right.
And his brothers, they take offense to that. They're like, look here, little dude, little kid,
get out of the tent.
What are you even doing here?
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be back, watching over
take
the
care
flock?
of the sheep? Yeah.
That's right. And so David calls him out on it. And so Saul gets word of it. They're like, look, there's this young kid. He's willing to go take on Goliath. And this is when he's I can't remember if this is when he's officially introduced to David or not. I don't know if you remember or not, but
I can't remember.
Yeah, but anyway, so he meets with Saul, and David's like, yeah, I'll take him. I'm gonna go in the faith of God. Is basically, he says, I'm not relying upon my own strength. And Saul says, here's a shield, here's a sword, here's a helmet and a breastplate, and he puts it on. It's too big, it's too heavy, and it's also not his expertise either, right?
Right.
He's a herdsman, he's a shepherd, he's not a warrior. And so he decides to take it all off, and he relies upon his talents, his strengths, with the sling, the 5 stones. He gathers 5 smooth stones, and then everybody knows the story. He goes out and takes on Goliath, and Goliath laughs at him and ends up hitting him in the head, chops off he falls to the ground, he chops off his head, and the rest is history, as far as that's concerned.
You got to read. I was going to say, you got to read the 45 through 47 of Samuel 17.
Right.
1 Samuel 17, 45 through 47. This is what David says to Goliath. If this isn't a pump up right here, I don't know. Yep. It says, then says David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword and a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, who thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And it says, and all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. I mean, he is
chill bumps right there.
Dude, I'm telling you, I mean, this is a little shepherd dude,
right,
with a sling, just standing out there, no armor, nothing. The Lord loves the underdog. We've talked about that a little bit before, with Gideon and other things.
Yeah. So
David,
go ahead.
I was going to say, what I love about David in this moment is that he in no way feels like he's an underdog.
Right.
You don't hear the story of David saying, but why me, Lord? You know, I'm just a shepherd boy. I've never made a battle. It's not that the Lord came to David and says, I need you to fight that giant, and I will be with you. Don't be afraid. You don't hear that. David it almost sounds like he did this on his own. Like he's like, I'm just, right. You guys, what's going, we need to do this. We need to take this guy out. What are y'all doing? I'll do it. I'll do it. And I love that about David in this moment. His faith was so strong, man.
Absolutely. And how I apply that to we always getting back to comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
You know, David did not compare. He did not say, I don't have a shield. I'm not like all these other soldiers out here. There's nothing that I can do.
Exactly.
And so how we relate that to ourselves is we all have talents. We all have strengths. They're not the same as everybody else's. And so it's so important for us to take the talents that we do have and use them to bless others' lives.
That's right.
And that's exactly what David did right here. The other thing, remember how I mentioned about Saul being large in stature?
Yes.
David was small. So you put Saul and David next to each other, you're naturally going to go to gravitate towards Saul to be the king, to be the leader that everybody assumes they need, right?
Right.
And David reminds me of a Gordon B. Hinckley. Gordon B. Hinckley was small in stature, small man and everything, but man, his spirit was huge.
It's huge, man.
And that's the way David was.
And his optimism was huge.
Right.
I mean, there was no doubt in David, man. There was no doubt in David at this point in his life. It says the Lord loved David. Right. And he did. I think it was because of that. One thing I like to mention, just he chose small, how we hear that he chose 5 small stones. He chose 5. You're thinking, if you got so much faith, why not just get it one? You're going to hit him. But I love the fact that he had the faith he could kill Goliath, but he also gave himself many chances to do it. He equipped himself in a way that he knew what he was good at. He took his talent and he multiplied it. He was good at the sling. He gave him as many chances as he could get. And I love that about that. We can learn a lot from that too.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll mention as we close it out, Goliath. We all have Goliaths in our lives, and Goliaths can show up at different times and in different ways. And we can accomplish, or we can conquer a Goliath and then another one show up. And that's really what I take away from the David and Goliath story, is that no matter how big the challenge that we face, whether it's addiction of any kind, whether it's pursuing a career, raising a family, anything and everything, Goliath can appear in many, many ways and forms. But having the faith of David and realizing that if we exercise the faith in God, we don't have to rely on ourselves, because as in the scripture you read, and the title of this is that the Lord will fight our battles. So
exactly.
And we'll leave it there.
Right.
Until next time, y'all keep on striving.